Ottoman PTSD in Serbia. The secret history of Serbian violence politics. Serbia is facing a bloody coup or civil war. President Aleksandar Vucic uses violence against his opponents and calls the protesters enemies of Serbia and Serbdom. At the same time, the protesters increasingly warn that blood will flow through the streets of Serbian cities. Behind all this lies hundreds of years of Turkish-Serbian history that Croatian media conceal, all because of ignorance and political censorship that directs us towards the failed policy of so-called reconciliation. Therefore, it is necessary to face history. In Serbian political life, the legacy of the Ottomans, who were the Serbian rulers for several centuries, is very strong. In that political legacy, the struggle for power was brutal and bloody, and rulers maintained their position exclusively through force. Behind Serbian politics lies the brutal and bloody Ottoman tradition of fratricide. Namely, the Ottoman Sultan, in order to rule peacefully, had to kill his numerous brothers, whom his father had with concubines from the harem. This terrible Ottoman tradition was adopted by Serbian politics. The Ottoman vassal Prince Miloš Obrenović treacherously killed Đorđe Petrović Karađorđe, the leader of the Serbian uprising against the Ottomans, all so that he could peacefully rule as the Sultan's vassal. During the century before last, the Obrenović and Karađorđević families violently fought for power in the very small vassal Serbia. Unlike other countries in the Balkans that introduced foreign dynasties and adopted European governance concepts, Serbia retained domestic rulers whose reign was marked by violence and intolerance. Viewed from the Croatian perspective, it is interesting that such a coup d'etat led to the creation of the notorious Načertanije. In the year 1842, the thrones of vassal Serbia was seized by Prince Aleksandar Karađorđević. His Minister of the Interior, the very poorly educated Ilija Garašanin, copied the Polish diplomatic plan for a Balkan federation and in 1844 turned it into a megalomaniac plan for the creation of Greater Serbia. This terrible plan brought us enormous suffering at the end of the 20th century that we must not forget. The peak of Serbian political brutality was the coup d'etat of 1903, when military officers killed King Aleksandar Obrenović and Queen Draga in a very bloody manner. Full of hatred, they riddled the king and queen with revolver shots, butchered them with sabers, and then threw the mutilated bodies out of the palace window. All of this was watched with horror by the Russian envoy Charikov, who warned the Serbian criminals about humanity and told them to remove the dismembered bodies of the king and queen from the street. This brutal coup became a prime example of Serbian political culture, where compromise is replaced by force and bloodshed is justified by the alleged fight for freedom. The officer conspirators ruled Serbia behind the scenes after a bloody coup. Instead of prosecuting them, the government declared them heroes. Moreover, the Serbian government created a secret terrorist organization called the National Defense with them. Chetniks and agents of this organization operated in Ottoman Macedonia and Austro-Hungarian Bosnia and Herzegovina. The head of this terrorist organization was Serbian Prime Minister Nikola Pasic. In 1914, he admitted that Serbia was responsible for World War I. One of the key figures of this organization was Colonel and Chetnik Vojislav Tankosic, who was the main Belgrade organizer of the Sarajevo assassination. Because of him, Serbia is responsible for the outbreak of World War I. The Serbs did not renounce political violence even in exile. An example of this is the case of the conspirator and intelligence officer Dragutin Dimitrijevic, who was sentenced to death in 1917 by the Serbian exiled military court in Thessaloniki. Behind this verdict were the fear and revenge of Prime Minister Nikola Pasic and Regent Aleksandar Karađorđević, who wanted to eliminate the influence of the conspirators through a rigged trial. The Serbian policy of violence was also adopted by the Yugoslav communist dictator Josip Broz. After a rigged trial, he had the leader of the Serbo-Yugoslav Chetniks, Dragoljub Mihailovic, killed and secretly buried. At the same time, to undermine the influence of the Karađorđević dynasty in Serbia, he rehabilitated Dragutin Dimitrijevic. We also felt this Serbian violence. The Chetnik terrorist Punisher Racic fatally wounded the Croatian Republican European Stjepan Radic. At the beginning of the 21st century, Serbian terrorists from the deep Belgrade state killed Prime Minister Zoran Đinđić. The policy of violence still marks the life of Serbia today, where bloody confrontations with opponents are still portrayed as heroism. Such a policy is currently led by the Serbian President Aleksandar Vucic. Your policy of violence was exposed 2 years ago by the New York Times, which published Europol data providing a detailed overview of Vucic's terrorist network in Serbia and Kosovo. Because of all this, political violence is to be expected to continue in Serbia. Aleksandar Vucic could, in the process, fall victim to a brutal coup similar to the one in 1903. In an atmosphere of hatred and violence, a civil war could also break out between supporters and opponents of President Vucic's regime. In any case, people who will insist even more strongly on the concept of the so-called Serbian world could come to power. Therefore, the Croatian public must view Serbia coldly and rationally, and must not fall under the influence of the politics of so-called reconciliation. Instead, we must constantly keep in mind the centuries-old Turkish-Serbian practice of uncompromising violence, hidden behind phrases about the fight for freedom. You can read about Serbian state terrorism in the bestseller by Dr. Tihomir Rajcic, Serbia's Guilt for the First World War.